Video games. Don't we all love them? They've got great music, visuals, atmosphere, and just about anything your mind can think of. We've all got a favorite franchise or series, and a big part in our love for these franchises are the protagonists who push them forward and give them an identity and recognizable nature, and the Metal Gear franchise is no exception. I have a lot of love for this series and been playing it since I was a small child. It's got cool action, level designs, gameplay, and can function as an 11-hour movie if you want. The characters most people think about when Metal Gear brought up are of course the Snakes, and for good reason. They are the protagonists and playable characters for almost every Metal Gear game, and they are massive badasses. But what about their next best competition? Of course, I'm talking about the mop-headed Raiden. In this video, I would like to argue and give reasons for why Raiden is my favorite protagonist in not just Metal Gear, but possibly gaming as a whole. This video will include spoilers for Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots, and Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. So if you've not played them before and are interested, then I recommend doing that before continuing with this video. Before that though, I just want to quickly ask that you like, comment, and subscribe. The support on the channel has been really amazing, and I thank you all very much for that. The Lost Judgment review is at about 1,000 watch hours and coming up on 10,000 views, and that's more than I ever imagined, so thank you all. Alright, enough of that, let's go. To learn about why he's my favorite protagonist, it is of course important to learn about his story. Starting from the beginning, Jack, which is Raiden's real name, is a former child soldier from Liberia who was raised as a killer by Solidus Snake. He was one of the best performers on the battlefield and earned the nickname of Jack the Ripper for his outstanding kill record. Of all the children who were forced to fight, he is the one who tried to ignore it the most. This is shown all throughout the Big Shell incident, which we will get to in a moment. Jack, once all grown up, gets his training from virtual reality missions that simulate real-life scenarios such as the tanker incident involving Solid Snake that deemed him as a terrorist. To summarize the Big Shell mission without making this into an 11-hour analysis and documentary of MGS2 alone, it is a scenario created by the Patriots as an attempt to replicate the best soldier in human history, Solid Snake. The events that occur replicate the events of the Shadow Moses incident almost to a T. Raiden is chosen for this because of how hard he denies his past. All of the other child soldiers that have fought alongside Raiden had grown up to resent and regret their lives, but he denied it and tried to live normally. The Patriots figured he would be easy enough to control, and with his combat prowess he was deemed a perfect candidate. Raiden isn't like Snake, who is confident and has a lot of his ideals and motivations very clear and understandable. Oftentimes, he doesn't even know what he wants to fight for or why to fight for it, other than the fact that it's the thing he's been the best at since he was a child. This is why it was so easy to have him come around and be the subject. Throughout the game, his ambitions aren't as rock solid as Snake's, no pun intended, and it kind of seems like he doesn't have a lot going for him in comparison to Snake. I feel like an interesting way to demonstrate the differences in Snake and Raiden is simply through their alert themes. Snake's theme gives a sense of urgency, but it's methodical in how it's composed. There aren't any irregularities in the way it's delivered and has a serious and somewhat dark tone that pretty much says, "Alright, you spotted me, no problem, you're probably fucked, let's go." It showcases how experienced Snake is. Raiden's theme is essentially the opposite, where the composition is very irregular and essentially says, "Oh fuck, I've been spotted, oh shit!"
Jack, what's going on? Answer me! Jack? Jack!
It's an upbeat tune that reflects how green Raiden is on the battlefield in comparison to Snake. It makes you feel kind of lost and confused rather than the determined and resolved feel that Snake's alert theme gives. The Big Shell mission, as said before, essentially recreates a lot of the events that are almost identical to that of the Shadow Moses incident. The main thing that throws everything off is Pliskin's appearance. Yeah, real deceiving. He throws things off and pretty much helps Raiden throughout the whole thing ever so slightly. Raiden is constantly clueless as to what's happening, which I suppose isn't too unreasonable considering just how odd everything about this mission is. I mean, his girlfriend is randomly assigned to the mission, there's an immortal, flamboyant, bisexual, knife-wielding psycho on the loose, a woman who deflects any firepower in her way, and a myriad of different things. It's just that his response to these situations are obviously different than that of Snake in Metal Gear Solid 1 when faced with similarly odd characters such as Psycho Mantis. But that's also an interesting plot point because it's like imagining if Snake's first big mission was that of Shadow Moses. Raiden, once he discovers Pliskin's real identity, which in case you hadn't pinned it down yet is Snake, is when the player is enlightened to the differences in the two soldiers to a higher degree. I would like to share a small segment of back and forth between Raiden and Snake just to give a clear depiction of this through the character's own words.
I'm here because I was assigned to this mission, not because I want to. If I could, I'd be out of here in a second. How could you come back to all this? Why keep fighting?
There's something my best friend said to me once. We're not tools of the government or anyone else. Fighting was the only thing I was good at, but at least I always fought for what I believed in. We work on our own, but it's a cause worth fighting for.
Why would you stick your neck out for something this risky?
We have a responsibility to the coming generations, to the world,
What responsibility?
to keep track of the mistakes we've made as a species.
We need to remember, to spread the word, to fight for change.
Near the end is when the twist is revealed to him about everything that has been happening with the Patriots, the simulation, and we get more insight on how he feels about things. Raiden's girlfriend, Rose, had been a spy hired by the Patriots to keep an eye on him and feed them data. There's a lot of foreshadowing in this throughout the game, but a lot of people will miss it because it requires doing optional codec calls for the most of it. The dynamic between Rose and Jack is a very prominent one, and they have conversations about the relationships, issues, etc. that give a lot of depth to his character.
It was, but I have nightmares every day. Pieces of the past I can't put together.
Why didn't you tell me?
You couldn't begin to understand.
You wouldn't know that until you try me.
I didn't want you to get hurt. I'm not like Snake. I never questioned why we fought. There was no purpose, no way out. They give you a gun, you ask how many to kill. If you didn't, you were the one they shot instead.
It's okay. No one is blaming you.
The only people who have no problem with my past have secrets and agendas of their own. Terrible nightmares. Every night. I can never forget.
You should have told me.
Told you what? That I'm a killer? And always have been?
No, no.
What I hate more than anything else in the world is my own past. I didn't want you or anyone to know about it.
I accept the good and the bad, Jack. That's what you do for someone you love.
The last 2 years with you, it's been more than I've ever hoped for. I can't risk starting a family.
It's all right, Jack. Please, don't say any more.
I think this love dynamic between Raiden and Rose was something that was very interesting, and I'm glad they added it because there was really nothing like this with Snake and anyone else in the games. The most important conversation of the game is the one with the AI at the end, but delving into everything will take a really long time to explain, so I'll just give the summary. Essentially, the AI told him that he has no free will and doesn't deserve to have the power to think for himself. As Raiden tries desperately to argue against this, they always shut it down and make him feel inferior, especially with this scene here.
The old model destroyed 4 years ago was Rex.
The new amphibious model is Ray.
Both of these are the same as the code names used by the U.S. Armed Forces to refer to Japanese warplanes during World War II.
Your code name, Raiden, too, comes from the Japanese Navy's name for one of its interceptors.
Stop it. I'm not a weapon.
Oh, really? Do you know the code name the U.S. Armed Forces used for the Japanese fighter Raiden?
It was Jack. Both of you are just weapons to be used and thrown away.
Just weapons to be used on the battlefield. Just pawns in a game. Exactly as you said.
And a weapon has no right to think for itself. Now, it's time to fulfill your purpose. Defeat Solidus.
The Patriots order Raiden to kill Solidus Snake. At first, Raiden refuses, but is reminded that Olga's child will be killed if he dies alongside Rose. So against his own will yet again, he is forced to finish Solidus off. The end cutscene of the game is with Raiden and Snake having a very heartfelt conversation about finding out who you are and what you believe in. Raiden seems to have found his resolve and tosses the dog tags of the player, signifying that he's going to be his own person, not someone else's test subject. Raiden and Rose reunite, and it seems that they had come to accept one another despite everything, but this isn't quite how it ended up. He ended up as an alcoholic, which slowly tarnished their relationship, and Raiden was also converted into a cyborg by the Patriots. This leads to him abandoning his family. He was also led to believe that his child had been lost to a miscarriage. The next time you see Raiden is in Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots. He gives Snake a tip of an ambush coming and later fights Vamp and Geckos to assist Snake. Raiden during the fight shows some insane strength and combat prowess, but what is more important than that is what he says to Vamp during the fight.
You too, immortal.
No. I just don't fear death.
This shows just how down the barrel and lost Raiden feels. Raiden, while on board the aircraft with Snake and everyone else, is in critical condition from the wounds suffered by the hands of Vamp and will die without the right treatment. Thankfully, they are able to get him the help he needs. As he is recovering, he sets his resolve to aiding Snake in the fight. He thinks that he has nothing to fight for and nothing to lose, and that by the end he and Snake will earn their freedom. What follows is one of my favorite back and forths in the series by far. It's so simple, but it hits really hard.
It was never going to work out for me. It even rained the day I was born.
You've got it all wrong. You were the lightning in that rain. You can still shine through the darkness.
The lightning.
Once he is adequately healed from his wounds, he goes to Shadow Moses to aid Snake however he can. He saves him from suicide geckos and begins fighting Vamp once more while Snake fends off the geckos. Raiden was seemingly losing, but he pulls off a move of deception and has exaggerated his damage, which gave him an opening to defeat Vamp. After a very emotional scene that I will not delve into for the sake of the flow in the video, Raiden and Snake make their way out of the tunnel on a Metal Gear Rex. Raiden jumps off the Rex to fend off the geckos and buy them some time. Making his way out of the tunnel, however, Raiden gets trapped under some debris at the end of the entrance as a result of a suicide gecko. Snake and Liquid fight in Metal Gear Rex and Metal Gear Ray respectively, with Snake emerging as the victor. It's not all well though, as Liquid retreats into Outer Haven and Snake is left defenseless as it starts running toward him, which would cause his imminent death. Now Raiden here does one of the most raw, badass things I have ever seen in a game. So, picture this. As he sees Snake in trouble, he reaches for his sword, but cannot reach it. So he dislocates his shoulder so he can reach it. And not only that, he cuts his entire arm off just so he can be set free. He then managed to stop the entirety of the Outer Haven to stop in an instant while he is essentially bleeding to death and holds it off until Snake can get to safety. He then stabs himself in the foot to give himself extra leverage to hold it back to give Snake even more time. Inevitably though, Outer Haven does overpower Raiden, and the last thing he screams is, as we are seemingly seeing the final moments of Raiden, there are secret flashbacks that the player can do to see the memories of Raiden and Rose, and he is reminiscing on the relationship and time together. The red light near his eye turns off and he is seemingly dead. Now, ignoring the fact that he is obviously not dead because Metal Gear Rising Revengeance exists, and he appears later in the game, I have just got to say that Raiden is one of the realest motherfuckers I have ever seen. He was willing to put himself through all that just to help Snake. If that isn't a true bro, then I don't know what is. Now, as if Raiden wasn't raw enough, he's able to somehow get aboard Outer Haven with no arms, only holding his sword in his mouth. Snake gets into the hallway right before getting the GW and loses all of his strength as the Tengu soldiers start to make their way to him. Raiden intervenes and protects Snake while he attempts to regain his strength. Raiden says one of my favorite quotes in the whole franchise when he makes his appearance here.
I am lightning. The rain transformed.
Snake eventually makes it back to his feet. Raiden tries to convince Snake to let him go through the microwave hallway, but he refuses and explains that he has more to live for than him. He tries to argue against it by saying that Rose means nothing to him anymore, but after Snake gets Raiden to hear him out, he agrees to stay behind and fend off the Tengu so Snake can get through the microwave hallway. Raiden then gives his farewell.
Thank you, Snake.
In the scene as Snake is walking through the hallway, you can see Raiden's desperate struggle to fend off all of the Tengus while still fighting with no arms and using his mouth to swing the sword. All throughout MGS4, I started to get so much more respect for Raiden for his determination and the tenacity. Even if it was misguided at times, you still have to respect it. In the epilogue cutscenes, Raiden is healing on a hospital from his injuries, and Rose comes in to visit. He's not particularly enthused at first, but once Rose reveals the truth of not actually being married to Roy Campbell and not having the miscarriage, Raiden finally gets a fairly happy ending. It seems his son, John, is scared of him at first, but that's not the case.
Scared of me, huh?
I'm not scared. I think you're cool. Kinda like a comic book superhero.
Rose. I'm done running. I'll never leave alone again.
When I first saw this scene, I was so happy because it felt like Raiden had finally found peace and closure with himself and his wife. He was finally able to live as he wished, got a family that he formerly believed that was impossible for him, and got the resolve to never run away from Rose, and now John again. Technically, I suppose this is where the canon story of Raiden ends, since the canonicity of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance isn't completely agreed upon since Hideo Kojima did not write the story, but I feel it does add a lot of importance to Raiden's character, so I will talk about it nonetheless. Raiden eventually joins a PMC group to provide for his family. Raiden takes up a job to help a PMC group called Maverick and ends up in a position of helping an African prime minister recover from a civil war. All seemed to be going well, but then a group of desperados began to attack the prime minister, and by extension, Raiden. Raiden fights through to try and help the prime minister, which leads to one of the most iconic moments in Metal Gear and possibly gaming.
Yes! Winning wide open!
After that magnificent showing, Raiden catches up to the train that the Prime Minister is on. He witnesses firsthand his death and angrily moves forward. The opponent he faces is Jetstream Sam. Sam says something during their fight that needs to be mentioned for later.
Now I see. You deny your weapon its purpose.
Raiden eventually loses his arm, and therefore the fight. He is nearly killed, but is able to last long enough to get out of the tunnel he was in. After this, Raiden is fitted with an entirely new cyborg body that has a new look, and of course, more power. Skipping forward a bit, Raiden meets a cyborg wolf sent to assassinate him. He defeats it and has it repaired to be used as a companion. Making his way forward while tracking down a Russian terrorist by the name of Belzayev, he comes across Mistral. She thinks they have a lot of common with how they grew up, both coming from war-driven backgrounds and enjoyed the killing.
You don't know me.
I lost my whole family, everything. I am a killer too, and a good one at that. His ideals gave my life meaning. Ideals, Jack. What are yours?
I protect the weak. And if I must kill to protect them, then so be it.
It seems we have less in common than I thought.
I'll take that as a compliment.
I really enjoy the back and forth between Mistral and Raiden because I think it shows how similar of a background two people can have, but the way they cope or take those experiences can lead them down a completely different path. It could have easily been Raiden on the opposing side if things turned out slightly differently for him. After Raiden defeats Mistral and Belzayev blows himself up, Raiden is tasked with infiltrating a research facility located underground in a sewer called Guadalajara, I think that's how you say it, Mexico. He lets Blade Wolf come as well since he was repaired and had his control and orders wiped. Making his way past dozens of cyborgs and other machines, he comes across and saves a young child named George. He calls in a rescue team to secure George and makes his way forward. A little later, however, he is called and told that they could not find George. Raiden also eventually finds a room full of children's brains that are being VR trained to be killers, which would make them similar to Raiden in Liberia. This pushes Raiden in an extreme way to put an end to the whole operation. Raiden eventually discovers a recording of Sundowner, who was the one who killed the African Prime Minister, the doctor in charge of the operations of the brains, and a politician named Senator Armstrong. Raiden then gives some more insight on what's going on. He eventually catches up to this doctor who now has George hostage. Raiden is tempted to save the kids who are about to be gassed and killed, but refrains because of George's safety. But George tells him to go for the shot on the doctor anyways. So after all of this, Raiden pretty much gets told that there is nothing they can legally do realistically to help these children and their brains. So he resigns from Maverick and goes on his own personal and pretty much illegal journey to put an end to things. And in Raiden's own words,
"We can't have any more Jack the Rippers."
In the car drive on the way to his destination, he starts thinking about what happened just before with George and the doctor. He seems to be having some deep thoughts about what he did and why he did it. Raiden slowly makes his way through the city and his way to World Marshal where the brains are being held. After chopping his way through hell and back, Jetstream Sam makes his next appearance and taunts Raiden.
All those cyborgs you've killed up to now, maybe they weren't kids, but they were people. You ever think about them?
Pretty much, Sam is provoking Raiden and dismantling his reasoning and justifications for killing the people he has up to this point. It forces Raiden into an extremely vulnerable mental state, as everything he had believed up to this point had pretty much been disproven. Slowly making his way forward, he is met face to face with Monsoon, one of the Winds of Destruction. They have a lengthy argument on memes, and just to clarify, a meme by definition is an element of a culture or system of behavior that may be considered to be passed from one individual to another by non-genetic means, especially imitation. Monsoon argues that memes control the free will of the masses, and by extension what is passed on to later generations. He also claims that Raiden's justification for killing are a meme in itself.
It spared you the burden of all the lives you've taken, absolved you of guilt when you enjoyed it.
You would think that Raiden would deny it, considering his character up to this point has been very vulnerable in rejecting to this exact topic, but instead, Raiden does something completely opposite and creates one of the most memorable moments in Metal Gear, and perhaps video games in general to an extent. Let me know in the comments if you think I'm dragging it. So yeah, Raiden pretty much says I'm a killer, I'm really good at it, and I love doing it. Despite this psychopathic behavior, Raiden doesn't forget his main motives or morals. He still wants to prevent anyone else from ending up like him, but he has finally accepted his dark past and has become one with his dark side. I'll talk more about what I think about this part in the next section of the video, but man, I must say, this is one badass moment.
Who's next?
Once Raiden folds Monsoon and lays him out like a sack of potatoes, he makes his way inside of World Marshal. He comes face to face with Sundowner in the room with the brains. Essentially, Sundowner is arguing that war is just human nature and should not be avoided. He thinks kids are all cruel by nature and are perfect for war. He says Raiden is a pure example of this. Raiden refutes and says he chose his path. After some more back and forth, they head to the rooftop and clash heads till Raiden inevitably chops Sundowner, well, down. 3 hours from that point on, something that, in quote, rivals 9/11 will occur. They deduce that the president is on his way to Pakistan, and if something were to happen, it would cause the War on Terror Part 2. They make a plan to get to Pakistan in time to stop the event from happening, but Raiden gets set back massively and has to ride a bike to the destination where he will get the aircraft used to get there. On his way there, however, he encounters the one and only Jetstream Sam. Rather than arguing about ideals or who is right or wrong, Sam pretty much says we're gonna fight and whoever wins is who history will deem correct. I like their rivalry, because they are both two people with their ideals and motivations, but don't seem to particularly hate each other despite being on opposing sides. It's the same reason I enjoy the rivalry between Dante and Virgil in the Devil May Cry series. Raiden kills Sam and discovers that he had hardly any enhancements to his cyborg body, signifying that he was not at 100%, but this is explained a little bit later. The conversation that Blade Wolf and Raiden have here is heartwarming to me, so I just want to share it and comment on it just a bit.
I guess even AIs don't know everything.
It is likely no single correct answer exists. Additionally, human conflict stems from opposing ideals and societal norms. I was not programmed with these guidelines.
You're better off figuring those out for yourself.
This conversation is nice to me because Blade Wolf reminds me of Raiden in MGS2, or hell, even MGS4, where he doesn't really know what is right or wrong and doesn't know exactly how to deal with certain information or concepts about society and human nature, but Raiden simply says that it's best to figure it out on your own. Maybe I'm looking a little bit too deep into this, but I do enjoy that a lot, and I think it shows how much Raiden has grown up at this point. Back on track though, Blade Wolf in a sign of respect says he is going to carry Sam's sword to remember him. Raiden, in his own show of respect, takes his blade, swipes the blood off it, and sheathes it in an honorful way. They then make their way to the base where the aircraft they'll use to make it to Pakistan is at. It turns out that Sonny was the one who had a large part in creating it, which is pretty dope. Raiden makes his way to Pakistan and makes his way through an air base and finds Blade Wolf damage on the ground, and shortly after a Metal Gear appears from underground. It is revealed that Senator Armstrong is the one piloting it. The story leads early and the world is calling for the war on Pakistan. Armstrong also thinks the war is for the better good and believes it creates jobs and gives people principles to follow without needing to think for themselves. Raiden defeats Metal Gear Excelsis. They then fight one-on-one, which leads to even further back and forth, mainly about Armstrong's beliefs. Armstrong is saying that he thinks America is unrecoverable and having a purge, so to speak, where people do whatever they want, however they want, for what they believe in would do wonders for the country. Raiden isn't on board at all and says, in his own words,
"You're batshit insane!"
and rises to his feet to take Armstrong on hand to hand. He is defeated very swiftly as expected since his sword couldn't even do much to the senator. As Raiden is on the ground, Blade Wolf then appears. He comes with a message from Sam to share and eventually comes to terms with their existence as an AI and comes to realize that despite their robotic nature, they can have their own free will and parameters. Blade Wolf throws Raiden Sam's sword and gives a few final lines before they begin the battle.
Let's dance!
Raiden eventually defeats Armstrong once and for all by delivering one of the most raw attacks in the series. In the final cutscenes, you see George and Sonny together. They talk about how Raiden has changed their lives for the better. Sonny says to some people he will always be Jack the Ripper who hurt a lot of people, but to her,
the Raiden I know is a hero.
And that for the most part is the end of Raiden's character arc throughout Metal Gear series. I may have missed a couple things, but I think I got most things correct. So now that we have a good understanding of Raiden's journey as a character and a person, it's time for the part of the video where I can incorporate my personal feelings about the character. Raiden has always been a character that I feel is very looked over. Sure, some people came around to like him in Metal Gear Solid 4 and Metal Gear Rising of course, but what about his first appearance in Metal Gear Solid 2? His whole story in Metal Gear Solid 2 is about how unfair and difficult his life has been, and how his trauma has led him down the path that he did not even understand. His confusion and bewilderment was something I could completely understand, and I wanted to see him succeed. Sure, he wasn't as badass as Snake, but he was cool in his own way with how he was trying to push forward and find something to believe in. The relationship and dynamic between Jack and Rose was something I found to be very charming. It felt like two actual real people that were communicating and trying to work through the extreme circumstances they were in. They were flawed and I respect that. The scene where Rose is revealed to be a spy was so intense to me because I really wanted to see the relationship succeed, and seeing Raiden be so distraught as being used yet again was something that made me feel extremely engrossed in the narrative. I felt as heartbroken as Raiden did. The ending chat between Snake and Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 2 is something that hit me very hard. Being a pawn during the whole mission with no real choices to make would make anyone feel lost about themselves, but the back and forth they have shows that no matter what the circumstances are, you can find yourself in who you are at the end of the day. I first played Metal Gear Solid 2 as a younger kid, so as a result, I wasn't really sure who I was or what I believed in either. I was kinda lost as most kids are. Although I didn't understand a lot of the game at the time, the idea that I would find myself no matter how long it took or how hard it was gave me a feeling of security and confidence. In a way, I kind of self-inserted myself into Raiden. I couldn't relate to Snake, who was always certain about what they believed in and fought for it relentlessly. Raiden was simply a character who hit home to me more, so as a result, he began to grow on me more and more. When Raiden sees Rose at the end and gives his own speech, and in the same vein as the conversation with Snake, it filled me with optimism for whatever laid ahead in my life. Him talking so happily about finding something to pass on to the future was heartwarming. In Metal Gear Solid 4, every scene he was involved in are the ones I remember the most personally. Particularly the scenes where he stops Outer Haven, fends off the Tengus for Snake, and the ending cutscene where Raiden gets his happy ending. Although probably not as important to his growth as MGS2, this game is right up there with importance. I think this game is where I genuinely started to feel like I could call him my favorite protagonist. Even as a side character to Old Snake's journey, it still felt like I could relate to him so greatly. I was still fairly young when I played this game from start to finish on my own time and was going through some mental issues. I kind of felt down about life in general, and seeing Raiden's struggles again, but even more desperate, made me feel pretty bad. But seeing his growth and ending really gave me a feeling of hope. It's sort of the same story with Metal Gear Solid 2, just in a different time in the future. Metal Gear Rising makes me genuinely happy every time I play it. In this game, Raiden is finally fighting on his own terms for what he believes in. Even though Jack the Ripper is back in full force, he is taking control of it to fight for what he wants to. He still fights against child soldiers and corruption. He has found what he wants to fight for and is willing to do what is necessary to accomplish those main goals. I think the best case of this in the game to me is when he resigns from Maverick in a personal venture to take down World Marshal. He knew there was almost no chance by any normal means that he could take down Armstrong and the entirety of World Marshal and their operation of grooming children into killers, so he did what he had to do to get out and fight for what he believed in. When Raiden first goes Jack the Ripper versus Monsoon, it did make me a bit anxious because I felt like it was going to revert a lot of his growth. But in retrospect, I think it is fine and makes sense because it finally puts a clear resolve to that aspect of him. I think Raiden has some of the best growth of a character I have ever personally seen in a game. Going from a child soldier in Liberia to a borderline suicidal cyborg experiment to having a happy life to accepting his roots as a skilled child soldier and fighting for what he believes in. I mean, really? Like, what a roller coaster, right? And I mean that in a good way. Plus, let's be honest, he's just really damn cool in the later games. There's a reason everyone adores him in these ones. The way he fights with his sword and his own self-taught and studied practice of the swordsmanship and the samurai code in a flamboyant way makes him instantly recognizable. And let's not forget he brought some of the biggest bangers in the entire series in his star game. Every time I'm in the gym, I throw on and start breaking my limits. Really, there's not much else I can say about my love and appreciation for this character that hasn't already been said or shown. I feel like I could keep talking about each and every single line or action in the games, but I feel my point has been made on why I love this character and why I think he's one of the best. He helped me through a lot of confusing times in my adolescent years and made me feel like no matter how bad things get, I can find my own way just with enough time. I recommend checking out the Metal Gear series if you have not, and then maybe you'll be able to empathize with my attachment to this character a little bit more. But yeah, I think that's about all I had to say. Thank you all for watching this video. Sorry if it's a bit shorter than my other long form content, but quality over quantity as they say. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and that's about it. Love y'all and stay safe as always.
Earth may not be forever, but we still have the responsibility to leave what traces of life we can. Building the future and keeping the past alive are one and the same thing.